You're watching the free version of SynthEyes Essentials. For projects and footage, head to BorisFX.com for the premium download. Hello and welcome back to SynthEyes Essentials. I hope you've digested our little theoretical detour. Let's get back into actually tracking stuff in SynthEyes. We will start by bringing in a new clip into SynthEyes, but this time I want to give SynthEyes a little bit more information. So first of all, I want to set the frame rate to 25 FPS as I shot it at that rate. But I also want to get a little deeper into it. So let's hit the More button to see some more options. Now we've got a whole lot more ways to customize our scene. We could set in and out points if we want to just track a portion of the scene. We could also tell SynthEyes if we would be working with anamorphic footage. But the info that I want to supply is the sensor size. Why is this important? We established in the last class that in essence, SynthEyes is calculating the camera position and lens distortion merely from a 2D image, where it triangulates 2D data into 3D space. In this process, it can help SynthEyes along to know what size the captured image originally had. And that is usually defined by the sensor size, sometimes also referred to as the film back. I shot this on my Lumix G100. That camera has got a micro four thirds sensor. If I would do a quick Google search, I would find out that a micro four thirds sensor has got a horizontal size of 17.3 millimeters. But there's a caveat. The Lumix does crop in quite a bit when filming video, so the value we will have to enter is 13.76 millimeters. But how are you supposed to know all that? Don't panic, there's good news here. Firstly, if you don't know what kind of camera was used or what size the actual film back is, you will still be able to perfectly solve the scene. But providing this data might help with a better solve and also a more real-world relationship to any lens info you might want to supply. We will get back to this a little bit later. You will notice that SynthEyes automatically adjusts the vertical value of the sensor size, because that is directly linked to the image aspect. And even though I filmed on a 4x3 sensor, as this was cropped by the camera to 16:9, this value is correct. Secondly, there are some great resources for finding out the right sensor size. Usually, the camera manufacturers do have all the relevant information on their website, so Googling the camera model and sensor size or film back is a great starting point. Also, vfxcamdb.com is a great resource. Let's take a look at the Red Monstro 8K, for example. You can find the correct values for all the recording modes this camera has got to offer. But back to our shot. With our sensor size being filled in correctly, we can step into SynthEyes now. In the first class, we used the Auto button to perform two separate actions at once, tracking the points and solving the scene. From now on, we will break those two steps into separate actions, and in this class, we will solely focus on the tracking part, specifically automated tracking. Let's switch over to the features room. Here, the process of automated tracking is broken down further into two steps. The first one is blipping. A blip is a potential tracking point for SynthEyes, the raw tracking data. So if we press blip this frame, we can see all the areas of contrast that SynthEyes identifies as potential trackers. Now a tracker for a single frame is not worth that much, so let's press blip all frames instead. Our time bar jumps to the very end of our scene, and we do see that now a lot of these blips have these trails attached to them. Shuttling through the scene, we see that there might be some really good 2D trackers for our solve here. But we haven't created any real trackers yet. For that, we need to select the most promising blips and tell SynthEyes to convert them to actual 2D trackers. This process is the second step of automated tracking and called peeling. We can do this one by one, but for starters, let's press Peel All. Now SynthEyes will convert a bunch of blips into actual trackers. It's maybe hard to see, but green rhombuses now appeared all over our image. If you want to see the rhombuses without all the blips and trails, you can go on over to the trackers room and the blips and trails will be hidden. But why doesn't SynthEyes just use all the blips for solving the scene? The more the merrier, right? Not really. Too many short and erratic trackers will throw the solve off, and manually selecting and removing bad trackers can be more trouble than it's worth. This looks pretty promising. There are definitely some great trackers in here. But how did SynthEyes come up with what blips to convert to trackers? Maybe you want to have more trackers. Maybe the blips SynthEyes chose are erratic or not where we expected them. Okay, let's head back to the features room and answer those questions. First, let's delete all the trackers we already created. We are going to do that by pressing delete leaden. Boom, gone. And then let's clear out the blips by pressing clear out blips. So now we've reverted our scene back to the state we started with. Now let's open up the advanced panel and start with this region here, small blip size and big blip size. So this is the expected size of a blip in pixels. I know this is really hard to understand, so let's rather visualize it. We can choose a camera view type. That way we can see what SynthEyes is seeing when looking for blips. So small will show us a blurred black and white version of our footage. If we increase our small blip value, our image becomes blurrier. Details that can still be seen in this view will be picked up as a small blip. The smaller blips are meant for details, but equally as important are the big blips. You want to set these up in a way that the small blip will pick up the smallest usable detail, while the big blip will pick up the largest usable detail. Switching our camera view type to big, we can see a similar black and white blurred image for the big blips. That is why this one is even blurrier than the one for the small blips. If you are working on very high resolution material, you might want to set these values higher to not accidentally pick up noise or artifacts when creating your blips. This way we can set up the parameters for the way blips are created. But then there is this section, which will basically decide what kind of and how many trackers we end up with when hitting Peel All. Here we can define how many blips will be actually converted to trackers. So we can define a minimum length for our trackers. If you want your trackers to be at least 20 frames long, you can set that up here. Same goes for the number of trackers. In the last class, we established that for a proper 3D solve, we need at least 11 trackers. So a default of a minimum of 12 trackers per frame makes total sense. But if you've got a very fast moving shot, you might want to set that value higher. And then you can set a maximum number of trackers for your shot. So once SynthEyes has reached this ceiling, it'll just stop promoting blips to trackers. But your minimum trackers per frame can override this value. So if SynthEyes can't achieve 12 trackers per frame with a number you specified here, it will promote more blips to trackers once we hit Peel All. I'm going to go with a small blip size of 10 and a big blip size of 20, and I will bump up the maximum tracker number to 200. Let's not forget to set our camera view type back to normal and close the advanced window. And let's blip all frames again. And Peel All. But what is to golden? To golden will turn automatic trackers to manual trackers. We could head over straight to the solver room and solve like this with the automatic trackers. Nothing wrong with that. That is what happened in the first class when we used the auto button. But maybe we want to be a little bit more selective about our trackers. A bunch of them are located on leaves. That's always a little bit dicey because leaves tend to move, especially if it's windy. To avoid bringing those trackers into our solve, we can select all the really good trackers and declare them as golden. So I'm going to quickly shuttle through our clip, and by holding down Shift and the left mouse button, I can lasso select all the trackers where I know that they are on solid surfaces. Walls, the rails, the ground, etc. And now let's press the golden. You see how the rhombuses change to squares and also receive individual names so that they are easier to differentiate. But don't forget to press delete leaden. Unlike before, this will not clear out all the trackers, but just the ones that have not been converted to manual trackers before. In this class, we learned how SynthEyes sees its raw tracking data, the blips, and chooses suitable trackers from these blips. Then we used the advanced features control to further define our blips and also define which blips actually get promoted to trackers. And we also learned how to convert automatic trackers to manual trackers and then bring them over to the solver room. This is the place where we're gonna spend the next class. So relax from all the small and big blips buzzing around your head, and I will see you there.